Hey there, Blade fans! OG Blade Reviews back with you once again. And fairly obvious, we've got a big blade on the table today, a fixed blade knife. So for those of you who are fans of James Williams designs, that is one I did a review on a few years ago, maybe a year and a half, can't remember. And that is the Columbia River Knife and Tool HZ6. 6 standing for 6 inches or thereabouts. It's actually a little bit longer than that. And this has been an extremely popular knife amongst those who are interested in knife defense, knife tactics, etc., because this is primarily what you would call a fighting knife. And we'll get into some things throughout this review on the handle and how it works, and the blade and how it works, and some of the naming that James Williams has given his blades. And I've got a few others for compare, also designed by James Williams or Chris Williams, his son. And they got into business together about 2017 or so. I think I saw an interview from one of the blade shows by somebody who was interviewing James Williams, and he said that they started their company in 2017. Okay, that, however, with all that being said, a minute and a half is not the blade we're really focusing on today. So let's take a look at that blade that we are focusing on today. Aha! Just released within the past month, and this is January 2025, is the HZ4, because some people had been requesting a smaller, more compact, lighter, easier to carry blade, because this guy is big as far as both fixed blades go and just about any other blade, certainly folding blades. We're going to take it aside, come back to it in a moment, or two, or three, and talk about the HZ4. There's some differences besides the size. And what did they do? We've got an 1/8 inch blade stock now, instead of the, I think, closer to 3/16, but we'll measure it up, of the HZ6. HZ is a abbreviation of Hira Zukuri. Hira Zukuri being a blade style that harkens back to ancient Japan. And I've got some lookups I did just to give you some basic info on what those names mean. I am by no means a Japanese sword or Japanese weapons expert, although for quite a while, early in my martial arts career, I studied the Japanese martial arts, but mainly empty-handed martial arts. Another difference, so they used a thinner blade stock on the HZ4 than on the HZ6. They also, instead of using the crinkle coat sort of baked on finish, whatever that may be, on the HZ6, they went with a titanium nitride finish applied with a vapor deposit, and there's a name for that. So yes, the PVD stands for physical vapor deposition, which is a process that uses a vacuum to apply thin layers of material to a surface. Okay, so this is physical vapor deposition or deposit of titanium nitride, a very hard coating used on handguns and a number of higher end knives. I know Microtech uses it on some of their higher end production folders. So that is as much as I have on it, but it is an improvement, I feel, over that, this kind of, maybe it's hard to see, this actually isn't some of the roughest use of the coating that I've seen. This is not titanium nitride to the best of my knowledge. So we've got smoother here. We've got, so perhaps a better coating on a SK5 steel, which is a cold worked carbon steel. It's a tool steel. I believe not too far off from something like D2, but then again, we'd have to look at something like knife compositions, what is it? So my little app here, Knife Steel Compositions, states that SK5 has that composition, and there is, it's basically tungsten high-speed tool steel, SK5. It may not be that close to D2. I'm not a metallurgist, as I'm sure you've figured out, but it looks like everything they did with this knife is different than simply scaling it down from that one. They look exactly the same, except the scale's completely different. The handle is smaller now. It's a hand's width, just about right. And we've got a blade that's shorter by about 2.5 inches. We're going to get into some measurements in a moment, and we'll measure and weigh both. Another difference from the original SK6 is this uses a Bolteron sheath, which is close kin to Kydex, as I understand it. It's a little bit shinier. Here they went with Kydex, okay? And the nice thing is, it's a much better fit than the SK6, at least my copy. Thud. And it has kind of a drag there on the way out. See? It's not bad. You can still thumb it off, no problem. But now we've got a snappiness that is very much like a TiNi knife, a compliance edge knife, and some of those that are higher end CNC knives, which you might call kind of a semi-custom. All right, so I did say we'd measure, and I'm getting everything else out of the way here, and see exactly what dimensions we're dealing with. Overall, on the ZK4 is 8.9 inches overall. Blade length is, if you measure to the middle, 4.8 inches. So although it's called a, not ZK, I believe I misspoke. Get my notes out here. HZ, you're already correcting me, I know. HZ4 is actually close to a 5-inch blade. HZ6 is 6.5 inches, so a little bit closer to 7. But they're using the base measurement and not giving you the fractions. Getting to the thicknesses and whatnot, in millimeters, we're dealing with 3.1 millimeter on the blade stock, or 0.12. Handle, 0.55, which is not bad for a fixed blade knife. You're not going to get 1/2 inch on very many fixed blade knives. Comparatively, we have 0.20 inches, or 5.2 millimeters on the HZ6, and we've got a handle just a bit thicker, 0.58. So it truly is scaled up and not just elongated. You know, not just making the blade longer. Weight without the sheath of the HZ4, excuse me, 4.5 ounces. Weight of the original HZ6, whoa, 8.35 ounces. Big difference, about half the weight. So that blade thickness, that blade stock does make a big difference. Well, let's give you the weight with the sheath, I'm sure you're asking, right? Put it here somewhere. Weight with the sheath, 5.4 versus 4.5. So about 9/10 of an ounce more with the sheath on, if I'm doing my math in my head correctly. So yeah, both of these knives, the HZ6 and the HZ4, do have a very aggressive handle with milled out X's. This is supposed to mimic the actual cord wrap that is on the original Tantos. And here is where those cords would bump up there and give you those knobs kind of at the top. It is a little on the sharp side depending upon you and your hand. I went as far on the HZ6 when I first got it as to take off the G10 handles and do some light touch-up work on any corner here with a diamond file. And a diamond file will actually work pretty well for some light abrasion on G10. You don't need to use a coarse file. You may want to, but I did not take the scales off of this knife, but I did previously take the scales off of the HZ6, and it is skeletonized underneath, and as is this one. In fact, I'm going to pause the video, and it won't look like I did, but I'm going to take the scales off. Let's do that for you. Okay, that may have jumped just a little bit because that's a quick cut from the previous to this. There is the HZ4 in skeletonized form. Big cutout, weight relieving in the middle. These screws are T15s, just so you know. It's a Torx 15. And then what holds the screws in across both of the scales are these brass pins that are threaded on both sides. So very simple to take this apart. Took me about a minute, minute and a half while I paused the video. And that's what you got underneath. A little bit oily. So we're going to wipe a little of that oil off. There is your physical vapor deposit of titanium nitride on the handle under the scales. So they're not taking any chances on rust. It is a rustable steel. High carbon, but high carbon also gives you, in many cases, not all, a tougher steel. And we've got a fairly thin point on this guy. I wouldn't call it frail, but look at that. We've got just about the same thickness near the point on both, even though we start out way thicker on the HZ6. All right, so I'm going to put this guy back together for you, but I figured you'd want to see what that looked like. And so we're back again, jump with the video, but that allowed me to reassemble it for you. One thing I noticed that I didn't remark on when I had it apart was that the brass bushings that hold the screws in are keyed. They are D-style bushings, so they won't turn. And those are keyed into the blade tang not into the handle. So it doesn't matter which handle you put on which side, it'll end up the same clean look and so forth. I initially thought when I got this that I would need to soften up some of these edges here, some of these points, because you do get these points at the ends of the triangle here, but ends up being a triangle. And they can be a little sharp. But you're going to feel that if you push your finger into it and slide it along. You're not going to feel it with just a grip. And so again, here's the length of this handle versus the HZ6. All right. I got about an inch left over on the HZ6. I've got maybe half an inch or less left over here. Very much in keeping with the way that Japanese tanto style knives are done. They don't want a lot of handle. You can't have somebody leverage this out of the hand by grabbing a hold of something sticking way out here. So such a light knife, and it is a cutter as well. Came through sharper, perhaps because of the thinner blade stock than the original HZ6. Well, there we go. Not bad for a factory edge, and I haven't touched that edge. This guy being a little thicker, can't recall whether I touched this up or not. A little, I would say, not bad, but a little less sharp. So you have a good serviceable edge on this. They're not a bitey edge. You can see I can slide my finger along that. I'm hesitant to do it for very far on the HZ4, but it's still going to cut. And it's easy to strop these and put a little bit better edge on it. Of course, you want to redo the edge. That's totally up to you. I tend to keep the factory angle. I feel the factory does know where they want that bevel to be for the purpose of the knife. As far as you guys that are all into plunge grinds and so forth and resharpening your knives, we don't have a sharpening choil here. I know that James Williams does not like the idea of guards because they can get caught in the heat of combat on your clothing, on an opponent's body, and other things. He wants a clean in and clean out. The Hira Zukuri is, I took a little, took the liberty of looking these up. Zukuri is a Japanese word that means the act of making or style. It can refer to the style of Japanese sword or type of Japanese architecture. Zukuri, the style of a Japanese sword. I'll show this to you here. And then there's the Shobu Zukuri, and there is the Osuraku Zukuri, and the Kisaiki Moroha Zukuri, and Ryo Shinogi Zukuri, which you may or may not be interested in. But we're going to see that the Hira Zukuri could be one or two different swords that have been made over the years, or could refer more to a tanto, and in this case it's referring more to a tanto style or length of blade, meaning a knife as opposed to a sword. There are some knives that James Williams designed up to like an 11, 12-inch blade, no longer made, unfortunately, because they were a great buy through Columbia River. I had one of the 6-inch models long ago, but unfortunately got rid of it. They were traditionally wrapped and everything. So these are HZ or Hira Zukuri, a long tapering pointed blade that is a straight run, not straight really, but a curved run right up to the point. They are armor piercing to the degree that we're not talking about hard armor as much as softer armor and getting between the plates of armor in the old Japanese feudal period, medieval period back in roughly the 1500s. Again, my Japanese history is not a strong point. Let's take a look at the Osoraku Zukuri style blades. We'll take out the HZ6 for a moment. Here we go a little different, and we're also jumping in price point. We got about $110, $115 current price on this. This came from the Knife Center, the HZ4. Here is the Osoraku Zukuri Kaiken. This is the mini version, the 3.5-inch version. I also have a 4.5-inch version. But look at the handles are about the same length, not quite as tall. And we have a black micarta here as opposed to a G10. And not nearly as aggressive a milling or jimping, if you want to call it that, on the handle. There is also the Osoraku Zukuri folding mini Kaiken, almost the same length blade, about 3.5 inches. Again, there is a 4.5-inch version of this currently out for about $250-ish, and roughly the same, maybe 2.25 or so on this guy. So you're talking Sleipner steel on this. On the 4.5-inch, you're talking Magna Cut, and M390 on this one, Lion steel and Lion steel. And the interesting thing about the folder is that it is using a fat carbon fiber spectral fat carbon fiber, which is, I think, at least double to 3 times the density of normal carbon fiber. And this one is an integral handle, all one piece of fat carbon with an insert for the hardened, to hold the hardened steel insert. But otherwise, 100,000 cycles they tested this lock bar for, and it's a beautiful knife. It's going to cost you just a bit under $400. That could be a problem if it's an everyday carry knife, but you might want to go for it. Anyway, the review is not about that one, but I just want to throw it out there for compare, because this is a different blade style. We have a close to 50-50, maybe 60-40 on the straight versus the belly of the Osoraku Zukuri Kaiken. Kaiken is another term which we used to call Quaken, but apparently Kaiken is now the preferred term. Beautiful knife. There is a full review on this one. You can check it out on my channel. I'm not showing you anything here on the table that doesn't already have a full review. A knife for compare today that's a bit different entirely, but about the same size, is the number 12 from Station 9, what they call the Undercover. Way different blade shape, but as for defensive knives, tactical knives, this is very comparable in size, even though we have kind of a Persian upsweep here, but we have a handle that angles that point down a bit. I covered this one with a very interesting shrink tube grip material that I got on Amazon. I know Bob DeMarco had put the Ranger bands on his, but this is amazing stuff. If you need to cover a knife handle, you just slip the tube over, use a heat gun, shrink it down, and it is grippy. Feels kind of like a leather, maybe like a suede or something, with these X bands in here. It comes in different colors. Real nice and grippy, but not too grippy. Really like this. Another great option for everyday carry in the 4-inch territory. So HZ4, almost 5 inches. HZ6, 6.5 inches. And What shall we put away first here? Okay. These are no longer available. Basically, it's a temporary outage, lack of inventory out at Station 9 if you're interested in one of those. Talk a minute about holding a knife. James Williams has done a number of videos showing you how you can hold these style knives with no slippage. And he drives these through car hoods. He drives these through like 1/4-inch plywood, and he drove it through 1/4-inch plywood, one of his folders actually, right down to the handle with no slippage, no problems. It gives you lots of grip. You don't always need a guard. If you feel you have to have a guard, then you get something like this, which has a built-in guard for your fingers. I understand from Station 9 that the military people do pretty much require and like to have guards, but there are a number of tactical and military and special ops units out there using James Williams designs with a traditional Japanese handle with no problem. One thing he does is he palms the pommel and he drives in straight this way. And there again is no slippage even on the hardest of materials. If you're holding it, and the neutral handles are very amenable to this. If you hold it in the so-called pikal grip from the Filipino martial arts, but they also use it this way in tanto jutsu in the Japanese martial arts, no problem whatsoever. You cap it with your thumb and you ain't slipping. And again, he's driven it through 1/4-inch plywood and steel car hoods with no problem, no slippage. So, you know, you're not always going to run your hand up on the blade unless you've got a very slippery handle and you have a compromised grip. But I'm telling you, this isn't going anywhere. It's beyond holding sandpaper. There is no slippage. These grip the skin. These grip the skin. And trust me, I've tried it. You're just not going anywhere. So that is, after a fairly long review here, the new HZ Hira Zukuri style blade from Columbia River, designed by James Williams, the HZ4. Let's put the HZ6 back into the picture here again as we finish up, just so you got that comparison. Both very functional tactical knives if you prefer the Japanese style. And if you don't, I suggest for $115 you try one of these out at Knife Center. And I believe you might be able to get it at Blade HQ and other places as well. Wasn't available at my usual White Mountain knives, but he may have these in the future as well. I believe this one did come from White Mountain. You can get 10% off if you use my discount code OG-Blade. Right about now, you're going to see my logo over here. Click on it if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel. It'll bring you to the link where you can subscribe with a simple click. And I thank you for watching. Be well. Stay safe. Take care.